started. I'm Dr. Schiffman. I'm Dean of Humanities. Amanda Cook-Festerman, who usually introduces these things, is out ill today, so I am pressed into service, and I'm delighted to be pressed into service. We had to reschedule this talk, so we really weren't sure about who would be able to make it, particularly our speaker, given that she was coming from Iowa, where there's been some pretty bad weather.
Pretty gross.
Yeah, you're actually glad, weirdly, to be here rather than there. Nadine Valentine is a morning radio host on one of the top stations in Des Moines, Iowa. She grew up in LaSalle and attended LP High School. Upon graduation, she started school at Drake University. She studied broadcast news with a minor in sociology and graduated in 2017. She has since stayed in Des Moines. In addition to working 2 jobs, she acts and models on the side. She loves dogs more than people and will go out of her way to pet them any chance she gets. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Nadine.
It is 100% true. I went out to a bar last night with Hannah and my boyfriend, and there was a dog there, and we definitely pet the dog. Probably more than we drank, but, you know, I digress. So, I don't like to be too formal with these things. I don't like to talk at people. I prefer to kind of talk with you and walk around and make eye contact with you. That makes you uncomfortable. Excellent. Overall, it's great. Now, Robin did mention to me that there is the sign-up sheet in the back for extra credit. So if that's something that you need or want, make sure you get that. Just know I will expect you to ask a question. Otherwise, I will tell your professor not to give it to you. Great. Glad we're all here. So, first and foremost, I'm not here to make you feel terrible about being white. That is not my intention. That's not what we're doing here. Now, if I say something that really resonates with you, that you agree with, at Drake we would always do snaps. For some reason, we like to pretend like we were in a poetry slam, so feel free to do that if you like something that you hear. And finally, I hope you're not offended by cursing. I tried really hard to limit it, but it may come out. My mom is a sailor, and she will tell you that firsthand. Now, there is some language used in here, of course, some racial slurs that I had the pleasure of being called while I lived here, so those will be dropped in here as well. So just be prepared for that. So I'll let you all know now, because I'm sure you're wondering what I am and where I'm from, and by that I mean where I'm really from. So I am black and white, but I'm also Puerto Rican. And I just took my AncestryDNA.com thing and found out that I'm 2% Ashkenazi Jewish, so I'm very excited about that. So I am this kaleidoscope of different colors and cultures, all rolled into one shell of light brown skin and really big hair and terribly, terribly thick eyebrows. Now, I wish when I was younger, I wish I knew just how unique that made me. So coming back to the Illinois Valley is always a little strange because it brings up these feelings of anxiety and resentment because most people, you think, love to go back to their hometowns, right? They love to stop at the favorite place they went with their friends, and they love to go to the mall, and go to the bars that they couldn't get into when they were 18 unless they had a really good fake. But that was never really the case for me. I never felt like I was at home here. Because at home you're supposed to feel relaxed, you know, and like you can be yourself. And being a person of color in the Illinois Valley, you're never really allowed to have that. You're never allowed to be relaxed here. And I'm not saying there were people running around and burning flags and throwing nooses in my yard and poisoning my food, but it was racism, what I experienced, plain and simple. Now, the issue with the Illinois Valley and understanding racism is that a lot of people are under the impression that racism has to be physically violent, right? It has to be blowing up churches that little girls are in, and it has to be knocking people over at marches in Selma, you know, but racism is not necessarily a violent act. So, for example, I went to this birthday party when I was in like the 3rd grade at, what the hell's the bowling alley called?
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
The Super Bowl? That's still around?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm amazed. So I went to that, and I went to go put like a $5 bill in to get quarters to play the claw machine. There's a really nice ball that I wanted in the claw machine. And the girl whose birthday it was, her little brother comes up to me. So if I'm 9, he's probably like 6 or 7. And said, as I'm getting my money out, and he says, well, my dad didn't want you to come here. And I said, why? I brought a present, like I did everything I was supposed to do. And he said, well, because you're black, and my dad doesn't like black people. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, I'm caramel, so get it together. Thank you. And secondly, I know some of you were thinking, really, Nadia, are you sure he said that? Are you sure you remember that right? Are you sure that that happened? How could a kid like that already, have that much hate and already be able to vocalize it to you? And for some white people, it can seem completely impossible that brown people are still dealing with this, that we deal with this on a daily basis, because after all, we have Oprah and Barack Obama, and we live in a post-racial society. But let me remind you, and I hate to break it to you, that we don't, and racism is still very much a thing. And especially when you grow up as a multiracial person, it is a double-edged sword no matter where you go. So I'm too black for the white people, and I'm too white for the black people, and the Puerto Ricans don't even know I'm Puerto Rican, so they don't even know not to like me. And I haven't reached out to any Ashkenazi because I don't. So when my friends in high school would say the most outlandish, racist things, and I'd call them out on it, they'd be like, no, well, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it toward you. It's just a joke. Don't be so political. And Black History Month especially, this month that we're in right now, loved it, loved Black History Month. But it was the whole, well, why do you guys get a whole month? Because y'all get the rest of the year. Calm down, okay? So when I achieved something, it was because of my skin. And when I failed at something, it was because of my skin, which was really hard to deal with because it's this strange limbo where a lot of people of color find ourselves. And I can remember never really wanting to bubble in my ethnicity on the standardized test when you take the ISATs, because I'm terrible at math. Like, I kid you not, I got a 12 on my ACT. Like, it's not good. It's not good. And I remember not wanting to fill it in because I didn't want to enhance that stereotype that black people are inherently stupid or inherently bad at math. So I never did it. Like, can you imagine being that intimidated by a circle? Like, the test hasn't even started yet, and I'm already a hot-ass mess. So that fear of being average kind of bubbled up inside me. And it created someone who was so focused on breaking those stereotypes and proving society wrong that I actually was becoming unglued at the edges a little bit. Because it's constantly reiterated to people of color that it's not enough to be average. You have to be above average to be worthy of respect. And I overcommitted myself. You can ask my mom, you can ask my friend who's sitting next to my mom, and you can ask my boyfriend who's sitting next to my friend who's sitting next to my mom, that it's something I did and it's something that I continue to do. I was in yearbook. I was president of the academic club called Renaissance. I ran track and cross country. Those ones I kind of like more walked, but you get the idea. I was in it and I was there. I was in choir, I was in AP classes, I was in marching band, I was in Lead the Musical, I was working 40 hours a week, I was volunteering, and meanwhile all of this is happening, and I am falling apart while trying to prove everybody wrong. Became riddled with depression and anxiety because I felt as though the positive perception of people of color rested on my shoulders, which were already super stinking tired. Now on the opposite side of the spectrum, I'm also too white for the black people. So, how many of you have ever heard of colorism? All right, hands are going up, perfect. So colorism, for those of you who don't know, is a further divide in the black community based on how light or how dark you are. So it goes all the way back to slavery. Dark-skinned people worked in the fields because they were seen as animalistic in nature. Now the light-skinned ones were in the house, as most of you know. So that division has stayed alive, and it's still extremely prevalent, which means that I'm light-skinned, so I have way more privilege than people who are darker than I am. I'm expected to be smarter and more well-spoken and more attractive than people who are darker. And I'm mixed, so I'm seen as exotic, which is apparently a fetish that white men have. And they like to tell it to you when you're walking down the street or in a club. It's probably not the best pickup line, literally try anything else. But for some people in the black community, I'm not legitimate because I went to a private school, or because my boyfriend is white, or because my mom is white, or my best friend is white, as you can see right here. So one side says I'm too much, and the other one says I'm not enough at all. And that created such a big dilemma for me growing up. And I remember specifically wanting to be built like the girls I went to school with. I wanted to be a 0, I wanted to be a 2, but instead I was like a 4, 6, or an 8 as far as pant size went, because I had these big hips that I couldn't shove in a size 0, and it created many problems. And I wanted to get up in the morning and have this beautiful, sexy bed head, throw it in a cute bun, or be able to wear a middle part and not look like a founding father. But instead, I wake up every morning with this mess of hair, and some of it's here, but most of it's there, and some of it got over there, and we don't know how that happened. And I remember taking baths when I was a kid, and I would, put my head under the water, and I could feel it, get straighter, and it would fan out, and I felt like a beautiful brown mermaid was coming for Ariel's job, I swear. And then I would get up out of the water, and I could feel it starting to curl again. And every single time I got out of the tub, I would pray to the hair gods, whatever beautiful drag queens they were, to let my hair stay straight. And it never did. After every single bath, my curls began to tighten and spring upward, and I felt defeated, because I would never look like one of them. I would never be the cute girl next door with the freckles. I would always be brown, and by that stretch, I would always be ugly. Now, it's so important for young women of color to see others who look like us, dolls, action figures, actors, actresses, dancers, authors, because then we know that we can be something special. Because even as young children, we adopt this notion that something is wrong with darkness. It's scary, it's evil, it's ugly, and we see that in ourselves, and we begin to adopt that thought process. This isn't good enough. I have to be lighter. Let me go buy these bleach creams, or let me dye my hair blonde. Let me do something, anything, to be a part of that gorgeous, beautiful white population. And when I was in college, one of my professors showed me the video I'm about to play for you guys. And you may have seen it. It's called the doll test. And CNN did it. And I'll play probably about 5 minutes for you.
What skin color do you want?
Yeah.
Which one? Why do you want that skin color?
Because
Not sure. What do you think of that skin color?
well, it was kind of whitish, and that's all I remember.
Yeah. Why do you want that skin color?
Because it looks whiter than this time, because this looks a lot like that one. I just don't like the way brown looks, because the way brown looks really nasty for some reason, but I don't know what it is.
So you
No, not really, but sometimes.
Sometimes. And Brielle, they asked what color adults don't like. Do you remember what you said? That's right, that's what you said. Why do you think adults don't like that color?
Dark.
Dark. And adults, you think adults don't like dark?
Maybe some adults do, but maybe some don't.
Hmm. And then which was the ugly child?
That one.
And why was he the ugly child?
He was the ugly child because he was the ugly one because when he tried to go to school once, sometimes all the white kids would make fun of him
Why were they making fun of him?
because of this color of his skin.
Does that happen sometimes?
Not now, but back then it did.
Back in the old days?
Hmm.
Why did that happen back then?
Because I think the people in the school didn't think that like the black kids should get an education like the white kids did.
Are there now, do you see differences now between black kids and white kids?
No.
Do you think some kids do see differences?
Yeah.
In what way?
Well, maybe some people still think that blacks are ugly and whites are nice and handsome.
Why do you think they think that?
Because of what they heard, maybe.
Why do you think things have changed? You were saying that in the old days, people with different skin colors were treated differently.
Because Martin Luther King Jr. I think helped make black and white go to the same schools and bathrooms.
And you think that changed people's opinion?
Mm-hmm. But some didn't change their opinion.
So do you see different today? Is there a difference between a black person and a white person?
Not really.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. They're people. They're the same thing.
And they were asking about skin color. When you think about skin color, what do you think?
I think it's kind of magical because I think like we're not all the same, we're different. It doesn't really matter what color you are. It just matters what you're like inside.
Do you think some people think it matters what skin color you are?
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do. I wonder why they think that. Yeah, your color is kind of who you are. It makes you you.
Why do you think some kids treat other kids differently because of skin color?
Probably because they're not like them. So they probably say that they're not like them. So they don't want to be their friend.
And one of you was asked about the skin color that most teachers think looks bad on a girl. And you said, I don't think it matters. They want to help you learn. It doesn't matter what's on the outside, only on the inside. You said that. Explain that. What do you mean?
Like, I don't think I think the teachers that are mature, like, they don't really care what color you are. They just, like, want you to get a good education.
Did you see any difference between those girls?
No. They all look pretty friendly.
They all look pretty friendly.
Yeah.
Do you think some people would see a difference, or do you think most people would just say they seem pretty friendly?
That's the right thing to do. You don't judge people how they look, you judge how they act.
Show me the dumb child.
Dumb child.
Okay, why is she the dumb child?
Because she has black skin.
Okay. Show me the bad child. Why is he the bad child?
Because he goes up.
Show me the dumb child. Why is she the dumb child?
Because she looks black.
Show me the good child. Why is she the good child?
Because she looks whiter.
Show me the child you would like to have as a classmate. Why would you like to have him as a classmate?
Because he's white.
Show me the child who has the skin color most adults like. And show me the child who has the skin color most adults don't like. Look, show me the ugly child.
And why is she the ugly child?
Because she's great.
Show me the good-looking child. And why is she the good-looking child?
She's nice.
And show me the skin color you believe most teachers think looks bad on a girl.
I don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters.
All right, so we'll stop it there. So as you can see, I mean, kids themselves, whether they're white or black, they start to adopt those notions that white is right, black is whack, blah, 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 things that rhyme. So eventually, growing up with that same mindset, I realized that I wanted to do something to look more white, as you'd call it. So for forever, the thing that I had was this long, curly mane of hair. And eventually, I didn't want it anymore. Kids would stick their hands in it, they'd ask how it got like that, what birds were living in it, teachers would call it fuzzy, like it made no sense, it was a hot mess. So my sister and I begged our mom to let us have chemically relaxed hair. And essentially that makes your hair a whole lot easier to straighten. It does a bunch of different stuff with your roots and the makeup of your hair. And my mom finally, after years and years and years and years, let us do it. And the day finally came, I was so excited, and it took like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 hours. It took a long time. And I remember just like finally having it done and looking at myself in the mirror, and I felt like I should be walking around to a montage of like Britney Spears songs. Like, your girl felt good, and I looked good, and I knew it, and I was the most poppin' 9-year-old of all time. Y'all should have seen it. But it absolutely broke my mom's heart. Because she knew at that point that my sister and I felt so unbeautiful and so ugly in our skin that we had to take that measure to counteract it. And it took a toll on my hair especially. It ended up breaking off about 7 or 8 inches when all was said and done for the amount of time that I had it relaxed. So it started off like down here, and as you can see, it's a little shorter now. But to this day, it's still greatly damaged from that relaxer. And as I got older, I got tired of having to blow dry it and straighten it and do all that stuff. So I decided to kind of let it do its own thing and grow back naturally. And I ended up with this. Yes, thank you. I know it's nice. And so once I got into high school, I started to appreciate my curls more, right? I started to appreciate that aspect of my brownness and being mixed. And it's funny because high school was the time when I was trying to accept myself the most, but those were the years that I experienced the most racism in my life. So several months before graduation, I was in a business class, and our teacher had us work in the computer lab. He left to go to the bathroom, and of course you don't leave a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds alone in a room. When you go to the bathroom, it's a terrible idea. And there was this football player, and he was trying to flirt with this girl who was so obviously out of his league it was almost painful to watch, but he did it anyway. And he threw a pencil at her, because you know, you throw things at women when you like them. We love that. And so we went to throw it at her, and it hit me. So obviously, I kept it, like I held on to it. And I was gonna give it back to him after like I gave him a bunch of crap because he was on the football team, and I was like, well, you're terrible, like, please don't be a quarterback, you're awful. They were like 1-11 that season anyway, so it was fine. But the tables turned really quickly, so he said, well, give me the pencil back, and I said, well, you threw it at me, no. And he said, and the class was so quiet, he said, wow, what a typical nigger, always stealing shit. And I was like, okay, weird flex, but okay. And at that point, I really couldn't contain myself, right? Because black people are always told to be the better person when we're faced with racism, and then someone quotes Martin Luther King Jr., and we're all supposed to sit around a campfire and sing Kumbaya out with KKK, and everything's going to be fine. But that's not how it works. Because being constantly told to respond a certain way to ignorance It's really exhausting, especially when you have to do it what seems like all the time for the majority of your life. So if we respond with violence, it promotes this stereotype that we're inherently violent people, right? Then the offender makes some really lame apology like, I didn't know. Yes, you did. That's why you said it. You knew how deeply it would hurt, so you said it. And all of a sudden, it turns around and we're at fault because we got mad. And all of that anger builds up. It's kind of like working in customer service, and you never have the opportunity to tell off a really rude customer. You kind of just have to keep it cool, instead of telling Karen that her dumb ass should learn how to read return policies. Yeah, I digress. So after that situation, after everything I dealt with growing up here, I didn't even want to go to my own high school graduation. I refused. I didn't even buy a cap and gown. My principal bought it for me because she threatened me if I didn't go. Did not want to go. And I didn't want to sit next to people who told me I was pretty for a dark girl, or I was pretty because I wasn't that dark, or that I was their favorite black person because I didn't act black. And side note, if you ever want to call like a brown person beautiful or smart, feel free to do it, just don't add for a black person at the end of it. That'd be like me going, you're smart for going to, for going to a community college. Like, that sounds terrible. You're just smart. That's fine. That's fine. It can happen. So against my teenage wishes, I went, and I haven't been back here for about like 4 or 5 years. Just totally avoided it. And I have this big issue with the romanticized notion of small towns where everyone knows everyone, because they're usually not that charming for people of color whatsoever. So eventually, I started my college search a couple months before graduation, and I wanted to get as far away from here as possible. I wanted to go to UCLA, I wanted to go to Howard, I wanted to go to Columbia. I wanted to go somewhere with more black people, and I ended up in Iowa, which is like Illinois with fewer letters. I'll get to that in a second. So I was so excited to get out and to be around different religions and be around a more diverse population and to see people who looked like me, right? I didn't want to be the token black kid anymore. I wanted to have black friends who could braid my hair for me, and I wanted them to teach me everything I was missing out on while I was living here. It's like I needed a 101 crash course on how to be black because I didn't know how that worked. And I wanted to join the black sorority too. I wanted everything that I didn't have here. I wanted that in college. And Howard was my first choice. I got into it. It's a historically black college university. A lot of phenomenal leaders and activists have graduated from Howard. And I looked at the acceptance letter and I thought to myself, you're not black enough to go there. Nobody will like you, right? You're not going to fit in. You don't know anything about being brown whatsoever. So I didn't go. And when I looked at Drake in Des Moines, in Iowa, it reminded me of the Illinois Valley. And so for as much as I hated being here, it was something that was comfortable because it was easier to go to somewhere a little bit bigger with like 4 more brown people than it was to completely immerse myself in a culture that I'd never really experienced. And I got there and I was so excited. I was in this organization for students of color. It was amazing. We spent so much time together. I had like 2 black friends, which was 2 more than I had before. And I was excited for life and learning and love and possibility. But a lot of them didn't like me either because they thought I was a sellout. I joined a sorority, Kappa Alpha Theta, which is not a historically black sorority. It was founded in Indiana, for God's sake, so you know it's not. And I didn't listen to rap music. I went through an emo phase in high school where I like only straightened my bangs. It was awful. I listened to like Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco and Creed. So I was really like the complete opposite of what a lot of people expect me to be like in college. And to them I was a sellout. I disrespected my culture. And it continued to illustrate this idea that I was navigating two different worlds, and neither one liked the direction I was going, but neither one would give me a damn compass either. So it was a bit of a letdown to finally be around the group of people I yearned to be around my whole life, only to realize that I was an outcast there as well. Nonetheless, the world kept spinning, I had work to do. I studied broadcast news and sociology while I was in school, and during my sophomore year I had to take a radio broadcasting class. And little did I know that my professor would actually become my first boss in my career. And after he heard my second show, he wrote on the feedback form, "Come see me." And I was like, oh no, that's not good. Like, I thought the FCC, I thought I was getting fined by the FCC, I thought I was gonna fail. But that's actually what launched my career. So I started working Sundays from 10 to 2 on Star 102.5. It's like a top 40 station. A lot of Taylor Swift, a lot of Justin Bieber, lost a lot of brain cells doing it. It was awful. And then, unbeknownst to them, I packed my bags, moved to Italy for 3 months. And racism exists internationally as well, so tried to escape it, found more of it. And after I came back, they'd given away my air shift to somebody, because they weren't too stoked on the idea that, you know, I just randomly left and was like, can't come in, I'm in Rome, I'm sorry. So I needed to find something else to do. So they offered me a couple random spots here and there, filling in. And they asked me to start doing overnights on the rock station, Laser 103.3. A lot of AC/DC, Slipknot, stuff that I really don't listen to, but apparently I faked it really well because they kept asking me to come back and do it. And a few months later, I was called into my boss's office, and he asked if I would be interested in filling in on the morning show, while their third co-host was dealing with some health issues. And she eventually left, and they asked me to put in my resume, and I said, okay. You know, they wanted me to be the third character on the show. And for some obnoxious reason, they selected me out of people who've been doing it for 10, 15 years. And I don't want to say I'm a person who's in the right place at the right time, but I'm usually the person who's in the right place at the right time when things happen. And I joined two middle-aged white men, Moose and B-Socks, on a show with a listening audience that was about 98% conservative, and it was a listening audience of about 100,000 people. So, as you can probably imagine, I was not well received. My first day, a listener said I was using the race card. One called me an ISIS sympathizer because I made the strange observation that not all brown people want to blow up planes, and apparently that means I'm part of ISIS. Another one called me, what did he call me? Oh, like a libtard, which was the first time I'd heard that. It's become a little more popular now, but to be clear, we were the only morning show in the office that even touched politics, and it was so emotionally draining because of her emails. So several months later, the dust seemed like it was fun. Oh, you got it. It took a few seconds. Her emails! But the dust finally started to settle. People seemed to not hate me as much. I wasn't getting threats anymore, which was awesome. They just told me they didn't like me, and I was like, that's way better anyway. So, several months later, we're sitting after the show, Moose and B-Socks and I, and my boss comes in. His name's Ryan. He has a man bun. So he comes in. My mom told me to. You're 100% correct. So he comes in, and he says, B-Socks, I need to talk to you. Pack your stuff. And Moose and I kind of looked at each other, and I said, well, do you need us to pack our stuff? And he said, no, just B-Socks. I said, okay. So Moose and I are sitting, and I'm thinking, like, well, what do you think B-Socks? He said, I don't know. And I said, cool, me neither. So we're sitting, and about 20 minutes go by, and my boss comes back downstairs and gets Moose. He says, Moose, I need you upstairs. Moose said, need me to bring my stuff? He said, no, leave it here. He takes him upstairs. Then about 30 minutes later, like I'm 100% sure they forgot about me, I went, got coffee, ran home, came back, and you know, they come downstairs and Moose has tears in his eyes. And Ryan's face is all red. And they said, we had budget cuts. We had to let VSOX go. And I was like, God, really? Like, sad for him, but worse for me, because now I have to deal with it. I mean, he found another job, that's fine. Anyway, but the months following that were some of the absolute worst of my life. I became the target for everyone's hatred because people said I conspired to have VSOX fired. People said I slept with Moose and my bosses to stay on the show, which no amount of drugs, alcohol, money, persuasion, threats could possibly make me want to do that. And it was just this outpouring of hatred after that. People said I stayed on the show because VSOX was too conservative, but in reality, VSOX was super apathetic. He didn't bring much to the show. He wasn't involved in the community. And spoiler alert, he got paid way more than me. Like, I was making 15 cents a day. I could have been an infomercial. Like, for just 10 cents a day, you can help this poor college kid maybe afford some M&Ms. Good luck. So when it comes to budget cuts, it's about eliminating significant costs. My salary wasn't significant. It still isn't. So no matter how many times I explain that to people, I was the wicked witch of the airwaves. I was awful. And the one comment that was the worst, that caused me to break down, came from a listener who said the only reason I was kept on the show was because I was black and the station didn't want a lawsuit. My first reaction was like, wow, I wish they would fire me so I could get a settlement so the girl wouldn't have to work anymore, but you know, the chips haven't fallen like that yet. So my talent was never a part of the conversation. To a lot of people, I was on the show because I'm a woman and I'm brown, and that was all. And one day I was talking to my sister, and I was telling her about all of these terrible experiences that I had, and she asked, well, why don't you just move to a different city then, you know? One with more diversity. You can just escape that, go there. And no one ever asked me that question. And I thought, I mean, I could do that. I could break a contract, go somewhere else, search for a new career opportunity, but I didn't. And my answer was, I think I'm staying because there are brown boys and brown girls in Iowa who need me here. Because from that day I knew that I had a little bit of a bigger purpose. Sure, I was an entertainer, but I was also this symbol of triumph, right? One of our listeners, I'm pretty sure he's like our only black listener, by the way, approached me when I was doing a remote, so when you're broadcasting live from somewhere, and he brought up his daughter who was mixed, and he said, oh my God, she's so excited that you look like her. She wants to do what you do. And that was probably the best compliment I ever got. So I kept doing what I was doing because I knew that there were people who needed me to do it. And they needed to know that there was a brown girl on the #1 morning show in Iowa, and that their various religions and cultures and colors would never muddle their personalities. That all of those parts of them create a complex kaleidoscope of possibility. Thank you. Fabulous. So what questions do you have? If you signed up for extra credit, you need to have a question. Yeah.
I don't have extra credit.
Okay. Well,
Do you ever look back and regret not going to Howard?
I think I definitely have. I looked at transferring when I was at Drake, just because there were a lot of racial incidents that happened. But I don't think I regret it. I think I'm kind of where I'm supposed to be right now. But definitely as an 18-year-old, I was like, what am I doing here? You know, I could be stomping the yard down at Howard. I don't know why I'm a drink right now. So yeah, definitely regretted it. And now I still kind of regret it a little bit. Right.
So you ended with, I'm putting words in your mouth, but you almost felt obligated, right, to be that person. I imagine that's got to be exhausting.
Oh, it is.
So how do you summon the energy to continue when you have everything else you have to struggle against constantly, and now you've got this added?
Yeah. I watch a lot of South Park and I take a lot of naps, so that helps. And I pet a lot of dogs. But really, I don't know what it is. I guess it's kind of that fire where if I didn't do it, I don't think anybody else would, because it's so rare to stumble into that opportunity. Like, I'm the youngest person that's ever been, because I started when I was 19, so I was the youngest person that was ever hired for a morning show of that capacity in the history of our company. And I'm the only brown one pretty much in the whole damn company. So I kind of knew that that was going to be a responsibility of mine. And it's kind of like that when I was at LP too. Like, you know, I was one of the first black leads in a musical. I was the second black homecoming queen only because my sister was the first one. So I've always been that relationship, especially in Iowa where there's 13 brown people, maybe. So, yeah.
Do you feel like the climate has gotten better or worse or stayed the same since you were here?
Did you go out this weekend? Did you go to a restaurant?
Oh my God! So we went to what was that bar we went to last night? Claudette's. Yeah, I went out in Oglesby. And we went to Claudette's, and the bartender was like, "Do you know the girl on NCIS, Polly?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You know the girl who replaced her?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, you look like her." And I Googled her, and I look absolutely nothing like her. And I showed Hannah, my friend Hannah, and I showed my boyfriend the picture, and they were like, "Yeah, no, it's just because you're brown and have hair. That's the only reason why." But I was like, well, you know, you could have said something worse, so I guess I'll take that as a compliment. But I think the subtle racism in the Illinois Valley is absolutely astounding. Like, I had a girl spend the night at my house when I was like 7 or 8, and her parents came over and you would have thought it was like the, not the FDA, the DEA, like a full sweep of my house. And they asked my mom, like, "Okay, you have any boyfriends?" "No." "Okay, and what does Nadia eat?" Like, "When does she go to the bathroom?" I'm like, "What are things that," and it was absolutely insane. So most parents, you know, go there and, you know, they want to see the house, and, but yeah, they did like a whole detective sweep, so it was obnoxious. And they saw my mom was white, and they're like, "Oh, thank God, it's fine, she can stay clean." When do you want us to pick her up? Yeah.
You mentioned how you find yourself often in that limbo between being black and white,
Yeah.
and how it can sometimes be like having the worst of both worlds. Do you ever find yourself taking advantage of that though? Because like I can relate to that, and like depending on who I'm around, I can kind of blend in with the crowd and act differently.
Oh, yeah.
And appeal to different groups. So like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so you can wear a lot of different hats, and they call it code switching, where you can, if you're around black friends, you kind of adapt their language, and then if you're in a professional setting, like my second job's at a bank, so I can be talking to one of my coworkers and be like, "And then this bitch said," and the phone rings, and I'm like, "Thank you for calling First National Bank." Thank you. But that's definitely something that exists. If I'm around a group of my white friends and there's, you know, one of my black friends with me, we'll start talking about like how ashy we are because it's dry outside, and our white friends are like, "What do you mean?" So there's that like kind of balance there with like I'm speaking a completely different language to somebody because they don't understand it because they don't need to. But yeah.
Do you ever get, so you talk about when you're on the radio, you get a lot of feedback from your listeners. Do you ever deal with that on the air?
Oh yeah, yeah. So sometimes the host of the show, Moose, likes to take live calls for some reason, which is a terrible, terrible idea because you don't know what they're gonna say. Like, if we take recorded calls, you can edit things out. But there was one who called and Moose had him live on the air, and he said, "That stupid bitch that you have on there like needs to get fired," and da-da-da. And I was like, "Oh my God, Moose, they don't like you at all. That's so." people would email our boss about me and say, like, you need to get rid of her before something happens. You need to get her off the air. You need to do something. We need to fire her. She can't do that. And then when I graduated, because we always do like a phone topic of the day, put it on Facebook. The topic was, you know, Nadia's graduating from college today. What advice do you have for her? And someone was like, quit your job. And I was like, well, I signed a contract, so I really can't. Give me advice. I wish I could. So, you know, got a lot of it on the air. And off the air, by mail, by email, all the time. Still do. Yeah.
You mentioned dealing with depression and anxiety. Do you still deal with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'd give you the name of my shrink. She's in Iowa. Love her. But that's something that I've dealt with, and I'm always very open about it, but unfortunately in the Black community it's kind of a hush-hush type of deal. Not nearly enough brown people go to therapy that need to be there, because there's this whole essence of being like the strong Black woman, which has been illustrated in white culture as well as in Black culture, but that whole idea of like holding everything on your back is very normal. And unfortunately, not talking about things, especially trauma, whether it be depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, sexual assault, all of that is very hushed in the Black community, which is extremely unfortunate. So, yes.
So as an Ashkenazi Jew,
Yeah.
I can say, welcome.
Thank
You should definitely explore that 2%.
I'm really
Probably.
super duper
There's like a TV show waiting, you know.
I know. No, I seriously texted my mom and I was like, we're Jewish!
That's like almost a grandparent or something. That's.
I don't know. Grandma, are you Jewish?
I don't think so.
I don't know what side. And I'm also Greek and like Nigerian, so I was just having a field day for that. Field day.
But I do really have a question though. But I did want to say that. So if you could go back, what would you say? You talked about that 6-year-old, that 7-year-old, that 9-year-old. What would you say to her now?
Oh, the one that told me their parents didn't like Black people?
Well, you've given so many, you know, horrific and stimulating examples. So pick any one of those. I mean, what would you say now to that girl who had to deal with the humiliation of having the DEA sweep the house?
Oh, her, yeah. She's a hot mess, really. So just simply by me existing, I think I've...
Or the girl who wanted to straighten her hair. What would you say?
Yeah.
To her?
God, that's hard, because as much as you want to respond and cool and calm and collected, your first instinct is to be mad. But I don't know how I would have responded to that. I mean, I know.
But what do you want to say to her?
To yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, what do I
as a child?
Oh, as a child.
What do you want to say to her now?
Oh.
You went back to the past.
Sorry, I was really excited about the Ashkenazi. I think I would say to myself, it's not the last time it's going to happen, because it never is. And unfortunately, I would love to tell myself that, you know, don't let it bother you and let it roll off your back. But when that happens to you, people always ask if you're okay afterwards. And my thing is always, you're fine, but you're not okay. Because when something like that happens to you, it takes a toll on you. Like, I still remember what I was wearing when that little kid came up to me and told me that his dad didn't like Black people. And I still remember what time of day it was when the one kid told me I was a typical nigger. So, I mean, those things are kind of, they become imprinted on you. You know, they make you who you are. So I would probably tell little 6-year-old Nadia that, you know, success is on the way, but I don't think there would really be any like great helpful advice in that moment, because it happens again. So unfortunately, there's no like big revelation. Yeah.
In your roles as a model and an actress, are you getting hired as a strong Black role or as a strong white role?
So funny. So my agent, when I first submitted my headshots, was like, "Oh my God, people are gonna love you because you're racially ambiguous. Like nobody knows what you are." So the first commercial that I ever did was actually an Iowa lottery commercial. And I was kind of just like a random party goer, and I went up to like these 2 lottery tickets. So I wasn't really like the strong Black female by any means, which was nice, but in high school, I was like this evil queen, which I was like, well, that resonates with me, so that's fine. And then when I was younger, I was the Queen of Hearts. So I don't think I was necessarily casted as those roles because I was brown. I think it's because I'm very loud and I project. So I've only done like 2 gigs so far as the model actress, but yeah, I'm sure it'll happen. So
Good.
Yeah.
Did you ever have trouble dealing with like anger and hatred towards people that, let's say those rude comments to you?
Yeah, I would, and I still do. And I'm terrible, and I'll let you in on a secret, is that I creep on those people now and judge how much better my life is than theirs. Because sometimes you do that. And like, it's completely honest and totally petty, but I do it. And the day after the kid in my high school called me the N-word, he found me in the hallway the next day and was like, I just wanted to let you know that I'm sorry I said that. And the funny thing is that you don't necessarily have to forgive those people when they disrespect your humanhood and like you existing. So I kind of just walked past him, and one of my friends said, well, why didn't you forgive him? And I was like, because then he'd do it again. Like he knows that all he has to say is, I'm sorry, and then that's that. But I think he still thinks about that to this day. I don't know, I just creeped out on Facebook the other day. I could ask what he's up to, it's not much. Yeah.
So what do you wish teachers knew, or what do you wish teachers would have done to make it better for all students?
Can I say something?
Sure, Mother, this is good.
Just, the child who said my father doesn't want you here is an educator. And I found that to be, and is a well-respected and well-known educator. And to me, that speaks volumes about how small things can be conveyed to children in the area. I'm sorry, I had to add my 2 cents to the chat.
Yeah, but I would say there was one teacher who stuck up for me the most. I was in like summer school, and this girl told me that I had, because my eyes are super dark, they're totally brown, and when I was younger they kind of looked black, and my teachers would have to look for my pupils when we did like any genetic stuff because my eyes were so brown. Must be the Ashkenazi Jew that's in there. But this girl told me like I had black eyes like the devil or something. And my teacher was like, no, Nadia has really pretty brown eyes. And like everybody, she's got really beautiful deep brown eyes. But I think it's really important for educators to say things because it's probably so easy to separate themselves from that and say like, oh, I don't want to dip my toe in that, let me go over here. But it really is so important for them to say those things or to interact.
Some people say like they're colorblind, but that doesn't solve it either. Like they can recognize all the differences.
And I think colorblind is kind of a cheapo excuse to say like, I don't want to deal with what you have to deal with, and I don't want to hear about what you deal with. So I'm colorblind, and I don't see it. But I think it is really important for teachers, especially, to go beyond the realm of teaching just a couple segments on Black history. Because even in history books now, I've seen some where they say that the slaves came over as indentured servants. And I'm like, that's not a thing. So I think the atrocities that brown people have faced in this country are starting to become more muted in the way that they're taught. And I think it would be phenomenal for brown students and white students to learn. Obviously don't tell 3rd graders that, they hung some guy from a tree and, that's where the song Strange Fruit came from. But, illustrate to them how big it was and how impactful it was. And then also to highlight the folks who are doing really amazing things now. They're really awesome. And don't call their hair fur, and don't call it fuzzy, and don't call it nappy. Well. So, if that's it, it's nap time for me.
Remember to sign in if you haven't yet, and look forward to our next Black History Month event, which I believe is on Wednesday. Have a good day.
Holy